Hello everybody! What are the chances that Mr. Sean Ferrick disappears for a week and there's so many things that need to be talked about on the channel when he's not here? So, you've got my lovely face again today, and to be fair, if there was going to be anybody to talk to you about this new revelation, it kind of needed to be the Janeway superfan, really, didn't it? So if anyone heard a noise at about 7 AM UK time this morning, that was probably me screaming in response to a voice message I had received from Mr. Sean Ferrick, who at the time was on board the Star Trek cruise, the Star Trek cruise which was celebrating 30 years of Star Trek Voyager, and closed out on the final evening with an evening with Kate Mulgrew, in which she revealed something very exciting indeed. Not confirmed, but as you may know, as you may have seen, earlier this week, we reported on something that Mr. William Shatner had said with regards to conversations being had about him potentially returning to the Star Trek franchise, to the Star Trek universe. Similarly, conversations seem to have been had for Janeway to return to Star Trek. Now hold your horses, because I know what you're going to say. Janeway already returned in Prodigy, but this to me sounds like a Janeway-focused show. So this evening with Kate Mulgrew was a Q&A with the audience. And of course the question was asked, would you come back to do a Janeway show? I would imagine in a similar vein to Star Trek Picard. This is not a new question for her. We asked her the same question just last year when we interviewed her on the channel, which you should check out if you haven't already seen it. And her response usually revolves around it having to mean something. I spoke about this in our discussion about William Shatner returning, feeling a deep responsibility to make sure that if she did return, there was a deeper meaning than just being a cameo or anything in that regard. Her response this time to the question, though, was that conversations were happening and that she would be pursuing those conversations. That's not an outright no, and it's more than the I don't know that we kind of got last year. I think judging by the response when we asked the question and other interviews that have also asked the question, what it really boils down to for Kate Mulgrew is that she is concerned, and this is what she said last night on the cruise as well, is that she's concerned that what it would be, what she would like it to be, wouldn't necessarily be what fans would want it to be. The biggest thing being that she doesn't want it to be a vanity piece, which I totally understand. People suggesting, well, Prodigy is Janeway's return. And I think when you weigh up those two things and say, well, why would she say yes to do Prodigy but not to doing a Janeway-focused series like Picard? Janeway does play a really pivotal role in Prodigy, but it's not about Janeway. It's not a rehash of Voyager where we still have this main character as our focal point and it follows their journey and other people kind of come in and out of that story. Prodigy is very much its own story, and Janeway lends an element to the story that pushes it forward and builds to the Star Trek lore. We have hologram Janeway there as this mentor to the characters. She's more than just a cameo. She's vital to the story, but she's not the sole focus of the story. And similarly, we have Admiral Janeway, who actually in the first season kind of takes on that role of the antagonist who is pursuing our heroes. So it was kind of a different approach to the character that wasn't just a rehash of what Voyager was and wasn't just focusing on Janeway, on Kate Mulgrew, and being that vanity piece that she is concerned might be what happens if we did have Star Trek Janeway. And I totally understand that, and I respect that, because it could be very easy for an actor at this point to go, yeah, I'll come back. Yeah, let's make me the focus of the show again and bring me back. So I really do respect that decision and that loyalty that she has to the character and to the fan base and to Star Trek as an institution. So then I guess the question also lies with, could it, and if so how, could it link to Prodigy? Obviously, Prodigy does exist. It now lives on Netflix, which then does throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. If this relates to Prodigy, can Paramount really have much to do with that now that they kind of sold Prodigy off? Or is it going to be a spin-off of Prodigy? Would it stay to that animation style? I think judging by, I wasn't actually there, but judging by what I've been told, this was more a question of would you return in a live action form? But don't quote me on that, because I'm just telling you what Sean told me. I would suggest that this is more than the animation style of Prodigy, but that is an element that we could focus on, and it could be a route that they could explore, where it is perhaps a spin-off of Prodigy, so we, instead of following the kids, remain on Earth with Janeway and Starfleet and focus on it there. I guess that could be a way around it. But yes, there are questions about how could this work around Prodigy. Would it link to it? In which case, how's that going to work in terms of Netflix and Paramount? Or is it going to be its own thing entirely? In which case, where will you set it so it doesn't interfere with Prodigy? If you want it to work in terms of the age of the actors and all those sorts of things, the best solution in my mind would be to do the same thing that Picard did for season 3 of Picard. They didn't have to explain the actors' appearance because they'd set it so far in the future with regards to when we last saw those characters that it made sense that they had aged, and that worked. When you look at Prodigy, the events of the second season, by the end of season 2 of Prodigy, that's only 7 years after Voyager returned. Obviously, it's been more than 7 years since Voyager ended, and so you then have to think about how would this work in terms of the age of the actor in relation to the character. Then when you set the story, you don't want the stories to contradict other things that already exist, such as Prodigy, such as Picard. There's a lot of questions to ask, but I'm just glad that conversations are being had and aren't being immediately met with a no at this point. I think you all know how much I would love to see a Janeway series. Yes, please, very much yes. I guess also the question revolves still around Prodigy and how that's going to move forward. She also did reveal on the cruise that Prodigy it's not cancelled, but it's also kind of on the bench at the moment. It's sitting on the desk of a Netflix CEO somewhere. It's not cancelled, but it also hasn't been greenlit. So whether we would have more Prodigy in the future is still up in the air. The decision on whether we would have more Prodigy would probably determine whether we would get a Janeway series. I think if we had more Prodigy, then that would be the focus. I think for Kate Mulgrew herself, I'm not going to put words into her mouth, but I think she would like to see that through, rather than go on a new adventure and embark on a new series when she's so connected and loyal to Prodigy and to the Hagemans and to that story. So I think if you had the two shows weighed up next to each other, and season 3 was the option and was greenlit, then I think that would probably be the avenue to go down. And I guess, in a way, as I keep saying, Prodigy as a show is, in a way, a Janeway show, that Janeway show. But I know what people want. I, too, would love to see a live-action Janeway show similar to Picard, whilst also taking into account the concerns that Kate Mulgrew has of not wanting it to be a vanity piece. Of course, while we're on the topic of Picard, there is this legacy theory flying around. Everybody wants to see Star Trek Legacy, and I suppose we do have to wonder if conversations are being had with William Shatner, with Kate Mulgrew, about returning to the franchise, then we do have to question and speculate that perhaps Legacy is going ahead and things are being worked out behind the scenes to try and put Legacy in place. And I guess if we want to think about, as I just said, where a Janeway series could slot and make sense, Janeway was mentioned. She wasn't seen, but she was mentioned multiple times in Picard season 3. And so I guess if we were to have a Legacy series that followed on from the end of Star Trek Picard, where we had the crew of the new Enterprise with Captain Seven and those characters, that would be a good setup to have a return for Janeway. We have spoken about how it could work for a return for Kirk, almost as an anthology series of sorts, perhaps with each episode focusing on a different Legacy character in some way. But I think it's certainly interesting that these conversations are being had, and it does put into question what is going on behind the scenes at Paramount. Did they finally get the hint? Have they listened to the fans? And is Legacy actually happening, or a form of show similar to the Legacy show that we have been asking for? But it definitely sparks something knowing that these conversations are happening. Whether these conversations are regular occurrences, I don't know, but it certainly seems like something is going on here. But to have Janeway return would certainly be very, very exciting indeed. Overall, I think the thing that I really admire about Kate Mulgrew as an actor, as a person, and as someone in the Star Trek universe is she really values the fans. Within this discussion, within this Q&A, she thanked the fans for their support of Prodigy, of the show, I think of just all of them in general. Thanked them for their support of Star Trek. And when she was asked what she would do to bring audiences together, she said that Trekkers gave everyone hope. Then she finished by saying that if a Janeway series would help to give hope, then she would absolutely pursue that. And I think that just really goes to show the kind of person that she is. That even if it's something that she herself is on the fence about and unsure about, if she thinks it's something that could help and make the world a better place, make people smile, make people happy, then it's something that she would consider and would pursue that option, while sticking true to her principles and her requirements for it, but not dismissing it entirely. So I think that is absolutely wonderful. Just another reason why we should all love Kate Mulgrew. And also, while we're talking about thanking fans, she also had the opportunity on the cruise to thank Michelle Stokes, who was the person who organised the Prodigy planes. And she basically credited Michelle as the reason why Prodigy got picked up by Netflix. Again, just that humility and acknowledging that the fans are just as important as the actors, as the characters, as the show itself. So here's hoping we're going to have a Janeway series in the future, or at the very least, season 3 of Prodigy. But here's hoping we could have a Shatner starring Kirk series, we could have a Kate Mulgrew returning in a live-action Janeway series. Honestly, who knows what the future of Star Trek holds? I'm very excited about it. Anyway, I'm going to close it off there. I hope everyone that did go on the cruise had a wonderful time and you're not too sad when you go back to the realities of life and work and the world. But let's look on the bright side. We could have some wonderful, amazing things coming in the future. You're all wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble about Janeway. You know I could do it for hours on end. Keep safe, keep well, until the next time, live long and prosper.